AITA for knifing my neighbor's pool after he made my life a living hell for 5 months. Trigger warning, as there is brief mention of sexual assault. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. I'll try to keep from rambling, but I want to provide as much relevant context as possible. I, 49F, have lived in a basement suite with my daughter, 13, for 2 years now. I originally moved into the suite with my ex-fiancé and his daughter, but the relationship ended a year ago and it's been just my daughter and I living there since. When we were moving in, we met our new upstairs neighbors. We will call them Rob, 48 meters, and his girlfriend Olivia, 45F. They were also in the process of moving into the upper suite. Rob was very friendly and jovial, almost over the top. He introduced his GF by saying, "Oh, and this is my sandwich maker Olivia." Ex-fiancé thought Rob was fantastic and asked my opinion. I said I thought the interaction was friendly, but my gut tells me there is something wrong with this guy. I couldn't place it or really put it into words, but something about his energy felt off. Initially, I brushed the feeling aside because I'd just finished healing from a traumatic relationship with a diagnosed narcissist, and I felt I was being oversensitive, looking for red flags everywhere, and should give him a fair shot. This was my first mistake, not trusting my instincts and setting firm boundaries at the beginning. The day we moved in, our dogs met in the yard. My dog, she is a 130 pounds English Bull Mastiff, is very friendly with both people and dogs alike. His dog, he is a 50 pounds American Staffy mix, is not, and we were not warned. His dog attacked my dog and, no surprise, she grabbed him and pinned him down. His dog had a small puncture wound, which could have been a lot worse if my own dog was an asshole like his. Clearly my dog had no trouble setting her own boundaries. Rob brushed it off and there were never any problems between the dogs again. We live on a busy street with no stopping, parking out front, so we access our house through an alley. There is the driveway, carport and a gate to the yard. Both the top and bottom unit enter from the backyard. Rob's dog was always out in the yard unsupervised. This wasn't an issue for me until I put my Rom over the fence to release the latch and his dog bit my hand. Rob came out and told me his dog is not very good with strangers, but that once he gets to know us he will be fine. This was a few days after move-in. We got to know the dog and he became friendly with us. However, a couple weeks later I entered the yard with my 18-year-old son and the dog charged and bit him on the arm. Puncture wounds and bruising. I immediately bought a "Beware of Dog" sign and put it at the gate. Ex-fiancé text Rob and let him know about the incident, and he again just brushed it off, saying, "He is not good with strangers." The next couple months went by without incident, but in the summer 2022, a friend of ours, whom had already formed a good relationship with the dog, was outside in the yard and the dog lunged at her and bit her thigh. This bite was worse than the others and she did seek medical attention. Again, ex-fiancé text Rob with pictures of the bite and a request that we come to a solution to keep everyone safe. Rob, once again, brushed the incident off and claimed that his dog wasn't good with strangers. Total BS, because this friend wasn't a stranger. I reluctantly agreed to let him know when anyone unfamiliar was in the yard so that he could secure the dog. Not happy with that solution, but by this time, I'd gotten the sense that this man is unpredictable, creepy and could be dangerous. Just hearing the way he spoke about people and his gross sexual comments etc. I wanted nothing to do with him, but I felt that if I complained to animal control or my landlord, his wrath will be unleashed and there would be problems. Olivia has a daughter a year younger than my own and the girls sometimes played together. She spent one night upstairs at a sleepover and after that, she never wanted to go back or even play with the daughter. Her reasons were, "She's so bossy and throws a tantrum every time I don't want to do what she wants to do." However, she is a very empathic creature, my little one, and I suspect she is just uncomfortable being up there with this girl is 12 and yes, I've witnessed these tantrum. It's ridiculous with name calling etc. She learned this from her mother. More on this later. Olivia and Rob have a tumultuous relationship and have broken up, gotten together at least 3 times since I've lived below them. Rob is not a nice man and doesn't have any respect for women. Actually, he doesn't have respect for anyone, but judging by our interactions it seems women are on the bottom of the list. He cheats on her constantly and is just horrible to her in general. Fast forward to December 2022. Olivia has had enough and breaks it off. Rob goes and buys a crotch rocket, and within 3 days, he's crashed it while drunk. Totally messed up his knee and is now off work with nothing to do during the day but drink and be an asshole. Summer 2023 and Olivia is back once again. They bought a big as pool, above ground, that literally took up half the backyard. They also bought a blow-up hot tub. Ex-fiancé and I broke up and he and his daughter moved out. This is when things started to change. Rob was much friendlier and wanted to chat every time he saw me and started making weird comments and getting into my personal space. Every interaction left me feeling more and more wary of him. He started making sexual comments and wanting me to get into the hot tub with him. There was one interaction where I was walking by him in the driveway and he patted my ass. I kindly asked him not to touch me ever again. He just laughed. Olivia witnessed this as she was on the deck, and she hasn't said a kind word to me since. July 2023, I was exiting my suite and the dog came running down the deck stairs and lunged at my friend who was behind me. I managed to put my arm out to block him and the dog bit my arm instead of my friend. Mostly scratches, but if I hadn't reacted so quickly he would have taken a chunk out of my friend for sure. I messaged Rob and he was completely dismissive. Didn't even answer my text. I text again, telling him that if he bites another one of my guests I will call animal control and make a complaint to the landlord. I asked him to put up a gate on the deck, and after a month, and repeated messages, he finally built a makeshift gate. I was pleased. Until he refused to use it. September 2024, my longtime friend who lives out of town visits me often and the dog is familiar with her. They've interacted many times without any issue. Well, she walked out my door for some fresh air and the dog ran down the stairs and attacked her. And I mean attacked her. He circled her, barking aggressively and biting at her. He bit her, then circled her, then bit her, then circled her. This was not a simple bite. I heard her screaming for help, so I ran out and kicked the dog to get him off her, and he finally ran back onto the deck. Rob was on the deck. He witnessed the whole thing and did nothing. He was on his phone 15 feet away and did nothing. I cussed him out pretty good, but then brought my friend inside to deal with her injuries. The back of her thighs were already black and blue and bleeding. Her hands had puncture wounds as well from defending herself. Together we patched her up, but she went home the next day and sought medical attention. We didn't call animal control immediately. We talked about it at great length because I had a sense that if I did, it would not go well with Rob and I have to live in the same house, alone with my daughter. This is the reason that I hadn't called to date. Out of fear, I did text Rob with pictures and said that the dog needed to be leashed and muzzled while in the yard. He flat out refused. After talking it through with my friend and mustering up the courage, I sent a long text to my landlord explaining in detail the issue with the dog. My friend and I also made separate complaints to our city's animal control bylaw office. And as expected, this is when my life became an unbearable hell. That evening began a barrage of nuisance, harassment and verbal abuse that sent me into a state that I can only describe as complete and utter hell. I was subjected, by both Rob and Olivia, to daily name-calling and insults, incredibly loud stomping and banging so hard that my ceiling tiles fell down, destroying my property that was in the carport, and so much more. I thought it would calm down after a few days, but it didn't, so I recorded video evidence of all the above and forwarded all this to my landlord. My landlords suck and didn't even respond to my pleas for help, and only after I begged them to come over and deal with the situation did they respond. They did nothing, gave him a verbal warning, refused when I asked him to give a written warning about the dog and the harassment, and I was basically left to deal with this man alone. So much more to say about the landlords and the legal action I've taken against them, but I'll leave that for another post. Maybe I'll touch on it in the comments. Cops did nothing but warn him not to talk to me, which he ignored. I have an anxiety disorder, and to say that I was in a state of high anxiety would be an incredible understatement. I've never felt anxiety like this in my life. I was afraid of the dog and he would use my fear to intimidate me. He would sit on the deck and wait for me to come home, or get notified with his camera and come out, and let the dog into the yard. He sat up there calling me horrible names, not to be repeated here, and glaring at me. As I walked by the deck and around the corner, he would follow me and just glare. So incredibly creepy. I was afraid to leave my house, afraid to come home, afraid of being home. My home was no longer a safe space and I began having constant panic attacks. Like I was basically always in a state of panic. I also suffer from a disorder of the central nervous system, and the stress has caused me chronic pain. My doctor put me on a medication to reduce my heart rate as the constant adrenaline was causing my resting heart rate to soar. My Fitbit often counted me burning over 5,000 calories per day just sitting in a chair and shaking. In early October, I received a call from animal control that they had completed their investigation and the dog was deemed dangerous, aggressive. This meant that he needed to be muzzled and leashed at all times in the yard until a higher fence was built, and muzzled and leashed at all times off the property. Unfortunately, they cannot mandate a muzzle and leash once a higher fence is built, as it's private property. They told me my landlords had been notified of this and that he had just spoken to Rob before he called me. I hung up the phone and left the house to run an errand, only to find the rear windshield on my vehicle smashed to bits. So I checked the camera footage to see that while I was on the phone with animal control, Rob went out to the deck and shot my window out with his BB gun. The same BB gun that he uses to shoot bears that come on the property. Again, this is not a nice man. Cops were called and I showed him the video. Unfortunately for me, I had pointed my camera so that it only showed the lower deck part of the deck and was obscured by the wooden fence. In the video, you can hear him roll outside onto the deck in his wheelchair, then you hear the pop of the BB gun and see the glass shatter. Cops said because the video didn't show his face that criminal mischief charges wouldn't be approved. They told him they believed it was him and have him another warning not to have any contact with me. Cops were very nice and even helped me clean up the glass. They left and a couple hours later one of the officers came back to get a statement from me. Apparently Rob had called his SAG and made a complaint that the officer told him to stop being an asshole, so they had to open up an investigation into how the officer interacted with Rob. I feel bad as this officer stood up for me. The very next day I caught Rob on camera hurling insults at me and sent the video to the cops. The officer said that they would be forwarding criminal harassment charges to Crown. I thought, hooray, this will be over, but no, this was in October and he has yet to be charged. The next day I went to the court and filed a civil lawsuit against him. My motivation for doing this was not money, but a desperate attempt at getting the harassment to stop. I was grasping at straws. The more I thought about it though, the more I wanted to hold him accountable for his actions. I decided to look him up on the criminal court record website and I found out that he is already facing 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of assault. This was news to me and only made my anxiety worse. I have reason to fear this man and this confirmed it. The charges stemmed from an incident in which I called the cops after a night of drunken partying by Rob, Olivia and friends. At one point, an altercation ensued. A whole lot of yelling from the men and screaming and crying from the girls. It sounded like someone was getting the absolute shit beaten out of him. I thought they were gonna fall through the floor. Called cops and everything calmed down. Didn't think much about this, but after reading the date of his charges, I realized that it was the same night, same incident. This is when I decided I couldn't stay there anymore. I floated around from friend to friend, staying a night or 2 and then going home to be with my cats. In early November, a friend decided to do some traveling and offered her place up for me to stay and bring my cats. I jumped at the chance to get out of there. By this point I could no longer sleep in my own bed, as I would lie there and hear him snoring from above, old house, and just knowing he was 8 feet away above some drywall from me made my blood boil. I stayed at my friend's house until mid-January. My anxiety lessened but only by a fraction of a smidge. I still had to go home often for things and this led to more panic attacks and just feeling horrible. I had diarrhea for 4 months straight. Sorry guys, lost 40 pounds. I'm a bit thicker so this side effect wasn't the worst. My hair fell out in clumps. I have bow lines on my toe from the stress and a couple of my nails even stopped growing and fell off. Because of my medical condition, I was being followed closely by a doctor, who even wrote a letter in support of all the harassment and physical symptoms I was having, for me to give my landlord and the tenancy branch. All of this was from stress. My body took such a beating and although I'm recovering my doctor is concerned about the long-term effects of such intense prolonged stress. Early November, my landlords visited and handed papers to Rob. OMG, I jumped for joy. Rob's actions finally have consequences and I'm going to get my life back. Well, after handing the papers to Rob, they came and handed me eviction papers as well. My jaw dropped to the floor. I was stunned. This entire time, I have been nothing but respectful to my landlord and the tenants upstairs. I've done everything in my power to avoid these people, including leaving my home for months. I paid my rent on time and followed every rule. I did not engage Rob or Olivia and kept my head down and didn't speak back, except for the time I cussed him out after the dog bite. I've suffered months of abuse and now I'm being evicted. This was retaliation because I filed a dispute with the tenancy board against them for their inaction and failure to respond to my valid complaints about a safety and harassment issue by one of their tenants. They did not like this. They told me they would rescind the eviction notice if I dropped my dispute claim. What a joke. I immediately filed another dispute, this time for the eviction. Our province's residential tenancy branch is so backed up that instead of the matter being heard within 10 days, I received a hearing date in early February. This eased my mind a bit as the eviction is held until the hearing. Phew. I had some time to gather myself and figure things out. Mid-November, Rob and Olivia moved out. Well, sort of. They left their pool, trampoline and a carport full of junk. A new couple moved into the upstairs suite. Friends of Rob and Olivia, let's call them Peter and Joni. Peter and Rob had worked together, although not currently. Peter told Rob that he could take the pool down and grab his shit at his convenience, but it needed to go soon. He gave a couple deadlines which Rob failed to adhere to. In March, Rob and Peter had a falling out. Not so much a falling out as Peter just recognized what an asshole Rob is and how he is coming completely unhinged. Another guy that works for Peter was staying at Rob's new place but was leaving. He brought over a girl to meet Rob and his GF, thinking she might be a good fit to rent a room. They got to drinking and Rob got blackout drunk. The girl said something he didn't like and he grabbed her by the hair, pinned her down and held a hunting knife to her throat. Other guy had to pull him off. Cops were called and I'm not sure what happened. This was a couple months ago, but I know he's not in jail. He sits at home receiving disability because he doesn't follow doctor's orders and had to have another knee surgery, and drinks all day long. My camera captured this man hobbling on his cane and dragging a 15 pk of beer and a 2.6 of Jaeger every single day. So in March, Peter and Joni were fed up and took down the pool and stored it on my side of the carport. Takes up the entire side. This thing is big. Still refused to pick it up. Landlord won't do anything. They tried asking him but are afraid to remove it out of fear, I'm guessing. And Peter and Joni don't want to haul it off for fear of retaliation from Rob. I went home in February, had the eviction hearing and the eviction was thrown out and my landlords were basically laughed at. Unfortunately, there wasn't time to even touch on the other issues, so my dispute was dismissed with leave to reapply, which I will. Home still didn't feel like home and I struggled greatly. I finally said fuck it, scraped up some cash and left the country for 9 days. Best 9 days of my life, I tell ya. I got off the plane and felt all my anxiety and stress subside. I had 0 panic attacks, my heart rate slowed and I even got constipated, haha. Clearly the source of my anxiety was environmental. This all changed when I got back on the plane. Everything back and I almost couldn't make it home. After arriving home though, things settled and I am now finally able to call my home a safe space once again. Now to the asshole issue at hand. This past weekend, Jody told me that Rob and Olivia would be by this coming weekend to pick up the pool. They will be out of town but wanted to make sure I would be checking the cameras. I'm also going to park my car elsewhere so he can't do any more damage. Oh yeah, he previously shot out both mine and ex-fiance's side mirrors too, but we couldn't prove it was him. I was in the carport mucking around with some stuff for a project of mine and the pool kept catching my eye. I became fixated on it as a seething anger arose, an anger like I've never felt before. All the anxiety and fear from those 5 months came rushing back and in that instant it felt like he was actually on the deck watching me and waiting to hurl more insults. My brain knew this wasn't happening but the feeling was so real. I went into the house and grabbed a switchblade. I then, with my hands shaking, made 5 slices in the bottom seams of the pool. I stood up and felt such satisfaction in the moment. This man has gotten away with so much bad behavior and had a tremendous effect on my mental health and even financially by damaging my property. My daughter's life was greatly impacted as well. She and I are very close and she tends to feed off of my own anxiety and moods. I felt relief and I felt a little bit of justice. But now, I'm regretting my actions. What have I done? This is very out of character for me, and it's really hard to describe the feeling and emotion behind the action, but it was so very intense and real, like he was 8 feet away again. He comes to pick up his pool this weekend, and I don't know what his reaction will be. Hopefully he won't notice until he sets the pool up. I understand his property is legally deemed abandoned as he was asked by the landlords and failed to remove the pool. But this is not going to go over well with him, and I don't want any blowback on the new neighbors. They are very sweet and we have a great relationship. I don't want him to think they knifed his pool, but I am taking this secret to my grave. So Reddit. I get that I made an asshole move, but am I really an asshole in this situation? And how do I deal with the fallout of my own dumb actions?